if you have a good memory, you might be thinking, I think we heard this gospel 2 weeks ago. And basically we did. We heard it in Luke's version. And it's this story of the end time is always the story on the second last Sunday of the church year. But it's also the story on the first Sunday of Advent. Because when we look at the liturgical year, we look and realize that we are going through the history of salvation, the life of Jesus, but we don't look at it simply as the past, as the good old days, as only we could return to that again. But rather, we begin by looking at the future, at what we are headed towards, and then looking back to see where we are headed. If you don't know where you're coming from, it's hard to know where you're going. And so we begin with this gospel again of the end time. And of course, the frightening details of it, the images of it, are something that strike our imagination. But the most important thing isn't to realize what the details will be like, because really they're told in symbolic ways, though they could happen in that way. The point isn't to say this is exactly how it will happen. The point is, for Christians, what Jesus says to his followers. When that time comes, stand up straight and raise your head. That command says, you are not doomed. You do not need to look for a place to hide. You do not need to look for a way to escape. Rather, put your trust in the Lord whom you have followed, and the Lord will see you through this time of turmoil. When we look only at the horrors of the story, we can easily become disillusioned. We can become discouraged. We can think, I only fear the future. But when we look at it from the perspective of people in whom Christ has come to dwell, it means that even when we face burdens and turmoils and problems, God's grace is there to see us through. Stop and think of a woman in labor. She bears that labor, but not with a sense of, I'm doing this and there's nothing going to come of it, but people have told me how terrible it is, and all of this kind of stuff, the stories that go with that. She goes through labor with the hope and the love of a baby who will come forth and bring great joy. We who live our lives here and now probably will not see the end of time here, but we do see in our own lives times of trouble. We do experience in our own lives times of sickness, disappointment, reversal of good fortune, events that happen in our life which are trying to us, when sometimes they just become overwhelming to us. How will we get through this? How will we continue? How will we go on? I can't do this. And yet we can do it because God is with us. God is our strength. God does not necessarily make everything fine and perfect, but in going through the sufferings of this life, which in a way can be to us symbolic of that end time, though they come in different ways, we find that we can live and we grow. And that when we reflect upon the good things of our life as well as the bad things of our life, what we find is we can see the hand of God at work, often twisting from evil good back into its original shape. May we be people in this Advent season who look and say, number one, we have our eyes focused on Christ. We are headed in the direction of his kingdom, and we live by the values that are needed to live in that kingdom. The values of integrity, love, forgiveness, self-giving, being oriented towards others, not putting things before God or other people before God, using the wisdom and goodness of God so we're headed in the right direction. Secondly, we live as people of hope. We look and we say, no matter what happens in this life, God is here for us now, and he will help us through it. Maybe not in the way we want it to go, but he will help us through it. And through that, we will grow in his love and grace to be headed for his kingdom. And thirdly, in charity, that we live our lives with that ultimate value of Christ: love for others, love for enemies, love for strangers, as well as love for family and friends. May we be people who know where we are headed because we know where we have come from. And may we live our lives always with our eyes fixed on the prize of eternal life.